Well, for me, as has already been said, I took part in all three levels of the Duke of Edinburgh's award, and it won't come as a surprise to you that the expedition section was my favourite. I can see some of you smiling out there in the darkness. I'm sure you can tell me about the highs and lows of your own expedition experiences. Well, I absolutely loved it, and I think some of that was due in part to the fact that I grew up on a farm in Pembrokeshire, and from a very early age loved getting out in all different kinds of weather. Whatever the weather was, I'd be helping my dad on the farm or getting out on the sledge with my sister and playing in the snow. So the bronze expedition and the bronze award led to silver, led to gold, and I was left thinking, well, what's next? There must be another challenge out there. And so this was when I came across the British Schools Exploring Society, and they were advertising this expedition to Iceland. 4 weeks on the Vatnajökull Glacier in Iceland, doing scientific research and adventurous activities. And I thought to myself, I'd love to do that, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could spend 4 weeks in a tent on a glacier. I'm not tough enough to do that. But I thought, I'd give it a go and put in the application and see how I got on. And I was selected for interview and then successful in getting a place on the expedition. And this made me think, wow, I love the cold, I love snow and ice. This paved the way for me going off to university to study geography, and I was absolutely hooked on expeditions. So I then got my first job at the Royal Geographical Society, and this is where I met two other women called Sam and Felicity. And Felicity came into the office one day and said, I found this race to the magnetic North Pole. No all-female team has ever got to the finish line before. What do you think about doing it? And we looked at it and we thought, well, wow, it sounds amazing, but hang on a minute, this is Arctic, this is -40, you've got the dangers of frostbite, hypothermia, not to mention polar bears, and there were doubts in our mind, real doubts. But as well as that apprehension, there was the excitement of what could be if we could just prepare and get the right advice for this expedition. And so that was the Royal Geographical Society, where I spent 3 years working. And then in 2005, entered this race to the magnetic North Pole. After nearly a year's worth of training, seeking advice from professionals and getting ourselves up to the right level of fitness, the three of us went out to Arctic Canada, and we were racing against 16 other teams. We were the only all-female team in the race, and we called ourselves the Pink Lady Polecats. Now, I'll tell you where the name comes from. If you've ever eaten a Pink Lady apple, I'm sure you've all seen them in the supermarket, we got sponsorship from Pink Lady. And the name Polecats was thought up by teammate Sam, and we had various ideas for a team name. A team name is always really important, isn't it? It's your identity. And we discarded some of the ideas that came up, such as the drag queens and the pole dancers. We didn't think they'd quite go down so well with some of the corporate sponsors we were trying to attract. So we became the Pink Lady Polecats, and racing for 18 days across, that's the frozen sea ice of Arctic Canada you're looking at in that slide. We raced for 11 or 12 hours a day, constantly on the lookout for polar bears, carrying a shotgun, getting probably just 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night, having to melt every bit of drinking water that we needed. We, in the final 2 days of the race, overtook several teams whilst they were sleeping at night, because there's 24 hours of daylight in the Arctic, so we turned night into day and decided that actually skiing past them at night was the best tactic. And we completed the race and got to the magnetic North Pole in 6th position out of 16 teams, successfully becoming that first all-female team ever to complete the race. And this blew my mind. I mean, it absolutely made me sit up and think, well, if that's possible, what else is possible? And it was only 6 months after having come back from the Polar Challenge, I think I'd just about recovered, and a friend of mine said, what do you think about Everest? He said, I'm going to put a team together for Everest, what do you think? And my initial reaction was, no way, you're having a laugh, don't be so stupid, that's dangerous, why would anyone want to do that? It's the highest mountain in the world, you only hear about it these days because of the tragedies and the accidents that occur, You know, there's an area called death zone where there's not even enough oxygen up there to sustain human life. Why would you want to go? And so this thought was left in my mind, and I just sort of said, well, I'll help you with your sponsorship and your PR, and maybe come to base camp with you. The next thing I knew, I was being told that no Welsh woman had ever climbed to the summit of Mount Everest before. And this was a little bit like a red rag to a bull, and got me thinking, would it be possible? Again, I had the same two feelings, this apprehension of all the things that you're probably, thinking would be a worry, but this excitement as well, this, what could be if I put in the hard work and the preparation. And so here was the team. There were 4 of us, the guys from London Business School, from London, from South Africa, and Omar from Egypt was hoping to be the first ever Egyptian to climb to the summit of Mount Everest, so a truly international team. Clearly you've got to get fit to go to Everest, goes without saying, and if I tell you that my training regime lasted 18 months, I trained about 6 days a week, just 1 day off. I looked at my endurance, so running sort of a half marathon every week. I looked at my cardiovascular fitness, so working myself really, really hard on a treadmill, trying to increase my lung capacity, trying to train my body to use oxygen as efficiently as possible, because when there's not much up there, you want to be able to use it as efficiently as you can. And also practicing my balance by standing on a wobble board in the gym. More about that in a second. And the training was exhausting. Of course, there were days when I could not get myself out of bed, did not want to go training, but up here a little voice was telling me, if you don't go training today, you are 1 step further away from getting to the summit of Mount Everest. And so I would force myself to get up and go out and train. And of course that wasn't just in the gym, it was around many areas of the UK and overseas, much in Wales, in North Wales, the Peak District, over to the French Alps and Chamonix to climb Mont Blanc and other peaks over there, and out to the world's 6th highest mountain, Choi Oyu, in Tibet, which was the big milestone for me. It's 8,201 metres compared to Everest's 8,850 metres. And I was successful in getting to the summit of Choi Oyu, and that for me was the green light and the confidence boost in terms of me actually getting in the final sponsorship and making that last effort to go for Everest. Up there also is Kilimanjaro, which has been in the media a lot recently, and it is a very high mountain, just under 6,000 metres, so again, another good test of our bodies in terms of preparing for Everest. And when we set out on these weekend expeditions, we wouldn't just drive to North Wales and park the car, check into a B&B and go to bed for the night. We'd park the car, we'd get on our walking boots, we'd get on our waterproofs, hats, gloves, and we'd head out into the hills, testing ourselves at night navigation, seeing what we felt like when we were tired and hungry from the drive from London, and how we would cope with sleep deprivation. It was about challenging ourselves at home in the UK, and so that hopefully things would seem easier out on Everest. But of course, it wasn't just about fitness training, and alongside that, I was constantly juggling getting the funding. And if I tell you that the cost, just for me, was £54,000 to cover the cost of Everest and all the associated training, kit, equipment, oxygen, insurance, support from Sherpas and guides. And I didn't have that in my back pocket, and that itself was a mountain to climb. And I thought very naively that on the back of the success of the Polar Challenge, it would be easy to get the money. And I approached people and I said, I'm going to become the first Welsh woman and the youngest British female to climb Mount Everest. Will you sponsor me? And yet I got rejection after rejection after rejection. People saying, sorry Tori, we're not interested. Was that because I was going to Everest and that was inherently dangerous and they didn't want any possible negative PR? Or was it that they just didn't like me? They didn't believe that I could do it? I mean, I don't look like someone that can climb Everest, but I was trying to say that, I had the track record and that I could do it. And within a month to go, I had one final bit of hope. And I had a phone call from Marie Claire magazine. It was for a girl to achieve a £25,000 bursary to achieve her dream. And I thought I was there. I thought I had a final £25,000 in the bank, only to be let down a couple of days later when we didn't get it. And so we carried on with fundraising events such as this one, saving as much of my own money as I possibly could, and then with just a week to go, 2 sponsors came up, Investec, Asset Management and Find.co.uk were the 2 sponsors of my trip. And they said, we'll back you, we believe you can do it. And with that, I got on a plane and flew to Kathmandu. It's a 2-week walk just to get to Everest Base Camp, and I'm sure many of you fit hill walkers, having done some DofE expeditions, you could all get to Everest Base Camp if you're a fit and healthy hill walker. But above that, this is the challenge that presents itself. There are 4 camps and then the summit of Mount Everest. And the thing that catches most people out is that you cannot simply go from base camp up to camp 1, 2, 3, 4, up to the summit and come back down again. You've got to do what I describe as the yo-yo effect, where you go from base camp up to camp 1 and you come back down to base camp up to camp 2 and you come back down to base camp. And the reason for that is that you're trying to acclimatise. You're trying to get your body used to the lack of oxygen that you experience as you work your way higher and higher up the mountain. And in terms of how that makes you feel, you have a headache, you lose your appetite, you can't sleep at night, you feel nauseous. It's not a very fun position to be in, and having trained so hard and felt so fit in the months in the run-up to the expedition, to then have a headache and feel ill for about 80% of the expedition doesn't make for a great experience. But that's what you've got to do. And so the climb from base camp to camp 1 looks like this, and it's known as the Khumbu Icefall. And you can see there blocks of ice the size of houses that are there, just tumbling down the mountain under their own weight. It is an active glacier, and as it heats up in the daytime in the sunshine, it just falls away from itself. And the danger is that it could crush and kill any climber in the wrong place at the wrong time. I talked about balance, and that's why you have to have good balance. To cross the crevasses that you find in the icefall, they lay ladders, the Sherpas lay ladders for you to cross them, and it's just about holding on to those ropes and hoping you don't wobble and fall down. You couldn't actually see the bottom of that one there. Higher up the mountain it looks quite easy, more of a stroll perhaps, but this area of the mountain is like an inferno, and it's absolutely baking. And I don't do very well on a hot day in Wales. I'll get sunburnt in about 10 minutes. So being on Everest at about 6,500 metres, I had to cover every bit of exposed skin that I had to prevent getting any kind of sunburn, heat stroke or heat exhaustion. Higher up the mountain you have the Lhotse face, and it's this sheer hard wall of ice. You can see spindrift, loose snow and the wind swirling around those climbers. And it's just a case of battling to the top for about 8 hours until you reach Camp 3. And you spend 2 months doing this. You spend 2 months going up and down and up and down and up and down. And your body eventually makes more red blood cells to carry that precious little oxygen around your body. When you finally go beyond this and you go for your actual summit attempt, you reach Camp 4 at about lunchtime, and you wait until it goes dark. And once it's gone dark, this is your time for you to make your summit attempt. And at this very point when this photo was taken, and that's a picture of my Sherpa, the Nepalese mountaineer who supported me on my climb to the summit of Mount Everest. I was nervous. I was incredibly nervous. I had tears in my eyes. I didn't know what was above me. I didn't know if I would be able to climb to the summit of Everest. And I had to just plug into my MP3 player, listen to one of Amy Winehouse's Back to Black tracks, and then tell myself I could do it, and I would be able to climb through the night to the summit. The reason why you leave at night is so that you reach the summit in the early hours of the morning, so that then you've got all of the daylight hours the next day to get back down safely. Because if you look at the statistics on Everest, most accidents actually happen on the way down. You've run out of energy, you've used all your adrenaline, to get to the top, and you actually forget to leave enough in reserve to get back down again. So I set out with Tundu from Camp 4 to make this climb to the roof of the world. The drops were absolutely incredible, and I think I just didn't look down. All I did was I looked where I was putting my feet. That was the most important thing. There were ropes that I could clip into, but I didn't know who'd climbed on those ropes before me, and so it was all about looking at where my feet were. It's a knife-edge ridge to the summit of Everest, just with a 3,000 metre drop on your right into Tibet and a 2,000 metre drop on your left into Nepal. And it was a case of working away up that knife-edge ridge for about 10 hours before reaching the summit. And as that sun came up, I looked to my left and I saw Everest's own shadow cast out across the Himalayas. It is so big, it sticks out so much above the rest of the Himalaya that it has its own shadow. And there was one point on the climb, and I looked up, and I looked up, and I could see dots of head torches of climbers above me. And I found myself then looking right above my head, wondering why there was a climber right above me. And I was thinking, surely Everest can't be that high. I've been climbing for about 5 hours now. I must be getting close to the summit. But what I'd done that night was I joined the dots of climbers' head torches with the stars in the sky that night. And so actually I was getting closer to the summit, and it wasn't quite as far away as I thought it was. It's a very claustrophobic world. You're cocooned in a huge down suit. You have high altitude boots on that weigh about 1 kilogram each. You have a face mask. You're wearing an oxygen mask. You're breathing oxygen from a tank in your back. And the wind is so strong you can barely communicate with anyone around you. It is a very, very lonely climb. And this is the Hillary Step. If you've read any books about Everest, you'll know it's that famous, awkward, almost last step before about another 20 minutes before you reach the summit of Everest. And it's just awkward because it sticks out and there's lots of different ropes and you don't know which is the rope from the year that you're climbing, from 2007. But having successfully made it past the Hillary Step, it starts to level off. And it was at this point that I realised that I was going to stand on top of the world. And